Have you ever, I mean, really ever, stopped in the middle of a normal day? Not when something big happens, not during a crisis, just in an ordinary moment. And let this question sit with you for a second. Why is it that some people grow older and somehow become softer, calmer, almost lighter, while others, even when they are not alone, even when there are people around them, seem to carry this quiet heaviness? Not the kind of loneliness people talk about out loud, not the dramatic kind, but the kind that shows up in small, almost invisible ways. Like when you wake up in the morning and the house is just still, too still. Or when you make your tea or your coffee and there is no rush anymore, no one calling your name, no noise from the next room. And instead of feeling peaceful, it feels empty. Or when the phone doesn't ring the way it used to. Not because people don't care, but because life moved on, quietly, without asking you if you were ready. Or when the afternoon stretches longer than it should, like time itself slowed down just enough for you to notice every minute. Have you ever caught yourself in one of those moments? Maybe you didn't even put words to it, but you felt something. Because if you look around, not just casually, but really look, you start to notice something that's a little uncomfortable to admit. There are people who seem to have everything lined up the way it's supposed to be. Money, stability, a house that's paid off, children who grew up well, maybe even grandchildren running around during the holidays. From the outside, everything looks right. And yet, if you sit across from them long enough, you see it. A restlessness, a kind of uneasiness they don't talk about. It shows up in the way they sigh without realizing, in the way they fill silence with small talk that doesn't really go anywhere, in the way their eyes wander, like they're searching for something they can't quite name. And then, there are others. Completely different. People who don't seem to have nearly as much. Their lives are simpler, quieter, less impressive, if you measure it the usual way. And yet, there is something about them. You feel it when you sit next to them. They're not in a hurry. They're not trying to prove anything. There's a calm in the way they move, even in small things, like how they pour a cup of tea, or how they listen when you speak. A quiet kind of joy. Not loud, not flashy, just steady. It shows in their face, in the way they accept things without fighting every little change, in the way they don't seem shaken by things that would easily disturb someone else. So naturally, the question comes back. What makes that difference? Is it just luck? Did some people simply get a better hand in life? Is it about health? Because yes, that matters. Or money? Because we all know that helps too. Or is it something much smaller than that? Something so small that people don't take it seriously when they're younger. Something so ordinary that it gets ignored. Again and again, year after year, until suddenly it's been decades. Because here's the part that's hard to accept. The gap between a peaceful old age and one that feels heavy, restless, maybe even lonely. It doesn't come from one big turning point. There isn't a single decision where everything changes. It builds slowly, almost too slowly to notice. It happens in small habits, tiny things. The way you spend your mornings, the way you talk to people, the way you deal with quiet moments, the way you respond when life doesn't go exactly the way you expected. Little choices, repeated, over and over, day after day. Things that feel completely unimportant at the time, almost forgettable. But then years pass, and those little things, they add up. They shape how you feel when life finally slows down. They shape whether silence feels peaceful or uncomfortable, whether being alone feels like rest or like something missing. And the difficult part, maybe the most frustrating part, is this. When we're younger, or just busy living life, we don't think about any of this. We don't sit there planning what our inner world will feel like at 70 or 80. We're focused on work, on paying bills, on raising kids, on solving whatever problem is right in front of us. We tell ourselves, I'll deal with that later. I'll slow down later. I'll figure things out when I have more time. And somehow, we assume that when that time comes, everything will just fall into place. That peace will arrive on its own. That will just adjust. But life doesn't really work like that. It rarely does. And what happens for many people is that one day, things do slow down. The noise fades. The responsibilities change. The pace shifts. And in that quiet, something becomes very clear. Something feels missing. Not in a dramatic way, not all at once, but like a weight you didn't notice before, now sitting right there. And by the time you truly feel it, by the time it becomes impossible to ignore, it's not that change is impossible. It's not too late. But it's harder. Because you're not just building something new. You're trying to rebuild something that was never really developed in the first place. So today, I don't want to rush through this. I'm not trying to give you quick answers. This isn't one of those conversations. I want to slow it down, talk about it the way people actually experience it, honestly. Maybe a little uncomfortably at times, but real. Because what we're talking about is not abstract. It's personal. It's about what your days will feel like later, what your mornings will feel like, what your evenings will feel like, whether silence will feel like a friend or something you try to escape. And all of that, it comes back to something surprisingly simple. 5 small habits. Nothing complicated, nothing expensive, nothing that requires you to change your entire life overnight. But habits that most people overlook, or delay, or think aren't important enough to matter. They don't require perfection. You don't have to do them perfectly. They don't require money. You don't have to be in a certain position in life. But they do require one thing that people often avoid: awareness, the willingness to notice how you're actually living. Because here's the truth. Whether we like it or not, the peace you hope to feel one day, it's not waiting somewhere in the future for you to arrive. It's not something that suddenly appears when everything else settles down. It's being built, right now, in ways that are easy to ignore, even in this moment, even in something as small as how you spend the next hour, or how you choose to sit with yourself when there's nothing else demanding your attention. That's where it begins. Not later. Now. Let's slow down for a second. Not to analyze anything, not to come up with answers, just to look at life the way it actually happens. Not the version people post online. Not the version people talk about at gatherings, but the quiet, ordinary version. The one that shows up on a random Tuesday morning, or in the middle of a long afternoon. Because if you pay attention, really pay attention, you'll start to recognize these stories. And maybe you'll see a part of yourself in them. Or maybe someone close to you will come to mind without you even trying. There's the person who worked their whole life. You probably know someone like that. Or maybe that someone is you, always moving, always doing something, always thinking about what needs to be done next. Wake up early, sometimes before the sun. Grab something quick for breakfast, or skip it altogether. Go to work. Come home tired. Do it all over again the next day. Years pass like that. Decades, even. And it becomes normal. Being busy becomes who you are. Responsibility becomes your identity. People rely on you. They expect things from you. And you carry that weight, not because you have to, but because you want to. Because it feels right. Because it gives your life direction. And then, one day, it changes. Not dramatically. No big announcement. Just slowly. The job ends. Maybe you retire. Maybe the company changes. Maybe your body tells you it's time to stop. And suddenly, that routine, the one you followed for years, is gone. No alarm clock. No deadlines. No urgent calls. No one waiting for you to show up. At first, it sounds like freedom. It sounds like rest. But after a while, something feels off. There's too much time. More time than you expected. And it doesn't feel relaxing. It feels strange. You sit in the morning, holding your coffee, and you don't know what to do next. Not because there's nothing to do, but because nothing feels necessary. And that silence, that empty space in your day, starts to feel uncomfortable. Because for so long, your life was about doing things, fixing things, solving problems. And now, you're just there. And no one really taught you how to live that way. No one taught you how to just be. Then there's another kind of story, a different path, but it leads to a similar feeling. This is the person who gave everything to their family. You can picture them easily. The parent who always put themselves last, the one who said no to their own plans so their children could have more. Every decision, every sacrifice, every little choice was for someone else. Maybe they didn't even think of it as sacrifice. It was just what you do. You take care of your children. You make sure they're okay. You build your life around them. School schedules, meals, appointments. Their happiness becomes your priority. And for years, that fills your life completely. There's always something happening. Someone needs something. Someone calls your name. And you respond, without thinking, without hesitation. But time moves. It always does. Children grow. They become independent. They build their own lives. They get busy, just like you once were. And suddenly, the house is quieter. Not empty, maybe, but quieter. You don't hear your name being called as often. You don't have to plan your day around someone else anymore. And at first, you might feel proud. You did your job. You raised them well. But then, something else creeps in. A feeling you didn't expect. You feel less needed. Not unloved. That's important. They still love you. They still care. But they don't need you the same way anymore. And that changes something inside you. Because for so long, your identity was built around being needed. And now, you're left asking a quiet question. Who am I when I'm not taking care of someone else? And that question, it doesn't always have an easy answer. Then there's another story. This one confuses people the most. Because from the outside, everything looks good. More than good, actually. This is the person who succeeded. They worked hard. They made smart decisions. They saved money. They built a comfortable life. Nice home. Financial security. No major worries about bills. They did everything right. The kind of life people aim for. And yet, if you sit with them, really sit, not just polite conversation, but actual time, you start to notice something. Their days feel empty, not busy, not stressful, just empty. They have time. They have comfort. But something is missing. Because money can solve many things. It can make life easier, safer, more stable, but it cannot create connection. It cannot give you a sense of purpose. It cannot replace meaningful moments. And when those things are missing, no amount of comfort fills that space. And then, there's another group. People who didn't notice when they started pulling away. It didn't happen all at once. No big decision like, I'm going to isolate myself. Nothing like that. It was gradual. They stopped calling first. Then they stopped answering sometimes. Then they avoided gatherings. Maybe they told themselves they were just tired. Or that they preferred being alone. Or that other people were too busy anyway. And slowly, without realizing it, their world became smaller. Fewer conversations. Fewer interactions. Fewer reasons to step outside. Their comfort zone started to shrink. And what once felt comfortable eventually became limiting, even heavy, like a room with no windows. And now, even the thought of reconnecting feels difficult. Too much effort. Too awkward. Too late, maybe. And the hardest part is, they didn't mean for it to happen. It just did. Step by step. Quietly. If you look at all these stories, they seem different. Different lives. Different choices. Different circumstances. But underneath all of them, there is something shared, something subtle, something easy to miss, a kind of disconnection from other people, from purpose, from that inner sense of, I know who I am. And what hurts the most is this. These feelings don't appear suddenly. There's no single moment where everything breaks. They build, slowly, so slowly that you don't notice at first. They hide inside busy schedules, inside responsibilities, inside everyday routines. You keep going, day after day, year after year, and everything seems normal, until one day, it isn't. Maybe it's in the evening, when the house is quiet, when the TV is on, but you're not really watching. Maybe it's during dinner, sitting at the table, realizing there are fewer plates now, fewer voices, fewer stories being told. Or maybe it's just a random moment, sitting somewhere, doing nothing, and suddenly feeling something you can't ignore. And in that moment, a question shows up. Not loudly, not dramatically, but clearly. How did I get here? And then, right behind it, another question, one that feels even heavier. Is it too late to change anything now? If you trace all of those stories back, not quickly, not on the surface, but really sit with them for a while, you start to notice there's something underneath all of it. Something that doesn't shout. It doesn't break things all at once. It doesn't show up like a big event. It's quieter than that, but it's powerful. And it's easy to miss. It's this slow, almost invisible fading of personal meaning. Not something that disappears overnight. Not something you wake up one morning and suddenly realize is gone. It's more like it slips away little by little, so slowly that most people don't even realize it's happening. Years go by, sometimes decades, and during all that time, life trains us, in a way, without us even noticing, to look outward, always outward. What needs to be done? What needs to be achieved? What's expected of you? Who is depending on you? You learn to focus on results, on responsibilities, on being reliable. You become someone who shows up, who gets things done. And over time, you start to wear different roles. You're a worker, you're a parent, you're a partner. Maybe you're the one people call when something goes wrong. Maybe you're the one who keeps things together when others can't. You become a provider, a helper, a dependable person. And all of that? It matters. It really does. These roles are not small. They shape your life. They give structure to your days. They give meaning to your actions. They make you feel needed, useful, valuable, and there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, there's something deeply good about it. But there's a side of this that people don't talk about enough. Because while you're building all of that, while you're giving so much to those roles, something else can quietly fade into the background. Your relationship with yourself. Not in an obvious way. You're still there. You're still making decisions. Still living your life. But that deeper connection, the one that exists beyond what you do for others, it doesn't get much attention. Because there's no time. There's always something more urgent. Always someone who needs something. Always another task waiting. So you keep going. Day after day. You solve problems. You meet expectations. You move forward. And as long as life stays busy, you don't feel any loss. You don't notice anything missing. Because there's no space to notice. No quiet. No pause. Just movement. But then, something changes. It always does. Not all at once, but gradually, the roles that once defined your days begin to shift. Work slows down, or stops. Children grow up. They leave. They build lives of their own. The responsibilities that once filled every hour begin to loosen their grip. And at first, it might feel like relief. Finally, some rest. Finally, some time. But then, something unfamiliar appears. You have space. More space than you've had in years. And in that space, You meet something you haven't spent much time with. Yourself. Not the version of you that is working. Not the version that is helping. Not the version that is solving problems. Just you. And if you haven't spent time building that relationship, it can feel strange, uncomfortable, like sitting in a quiet room with someone you don't quite know. You might not even have the words for it, but there's a feeling, a kind of emptiness, or maybe not even emptiness, maybe just a lack of direction, like you're not sure what to reach for anymore. This is why some people struggle so deeply when they retire. And from the outside, it doesn't make sense. They have time. They have resources. They have fewer worries. So why does it feel so difficult? It's not because they did anything wrong. It's because for so long, their life had a clear structure, a purpose that came from outside. And now, that structure is gone, and nothing replaced it from within. The same thing happens when children leave home. People assume the sadness is only about missing them. And yes, that's part of it. Of course it is. But there's something else underneath. Something quieter. For years, your identity was wrapped around being needed, being the one who takes care of things. And when that role changes, you don't just miss the people. You miss the version of yourself that existed in that role. And without it, you start asking questions you never had to ask before. What do I do now? What matters to me now? Who am I without all of that? And then, there's another layer to this. Something even more delicate. Some people become emotionally fragile as they get older. Not because they are weak, not because they lack strength, but because their sense of worth was built on things that don't stay constant, on being needed, on being productive, on being useful to others. And when those things shift, even slightly, it affects them deeply, because if your value comes from outside, then when the outside changes, your foundation moves. And that can feel unsettling, like standing on something that is no longer steady. But here's something that's important to understand. And it's not something people often say out loud. Meaning doesn't just appear. It doesn't show up automatically when you have more time. It doesn't come knocking on your door one day and say, "Here I am." It has to be built. Slowly, carefully, in small ways. And not just once, but over and over again. It's something you nurture, like a plant you keep alive. You don't water it once and expect it to last forever. You come back to it, again and again. And the way you build that meaning is not through big dramatic changes. It's through small moments. Moments where you turn inward instead of always looking outward. Moments where you pause instead of rushing to the next task. Moments where you ask yourself simple questions and actually listen to the answers. It's built through reflection, through awareness, through paying attention to what you feel, what you think, what you need. Not just what others expect from you, not just what needs to be done. And this is where the real difference begins to form. Not in big visible ways, but quietly, in the background of your life. Because when you invest in your inner world, even a little at a time, you create something stable, something that doesn't depend entirely on external roles, something that stays with you even when everything else changes. And over time, that becomes your anchor. So when life shifts, and it will, when roles change, and they always do, you don't feel completely lost. You may feel the change. You may feel the adjustment, but you're not disconnected because you've been building that relationship all along. And when you look at people who age with a sense of peace, people who seem grounded even when life slows down, very often, this is what's underneath. They spent time getting to know themselves. Not perfectly, not all at once, but consistently, in small ways, over years. And then there are others who did everything right on the outside, but never really turned inward, never built that connection. And when life finally gave them the space to do it, it felt unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. And that, more than anything else, is where the difference begins. So, if all of this feels a little too big, a little too heavy, Then let's not start there. Let's not start with changing your whole life. That almost never works anyway. Most people try something big, something dramatic, and then, a few days later, it fades. So instead, let's go the other way. Smaller, much smaller, almost to the point where it feels like this can't possibly matter. And yet, it does, more than you think. So where do we begin? Not with a big plan, not with a strict routine, not with something that takes hours. We begin with something simple, spending a little time, just with yourself. 15 minutes, maybe 20, if you can, 30. Not all at once, if that feels like too much, but enough to notice, enough to feel the difference. And here's the important part. It has to be real time. Not time where you're scrolling. Not time where the TV is playing in the background. Not time where you're half distracted. I mean actual time, where it's just you. No responsibilities waiting. No one asking for anything. No list in your head that you're trying to get through. Just you and that space. And I'll be honest, at the beginning, it can feel strange, a little awkward. Some people even feel restless, like they should be doing something more useful. You might sit there and think, what am I supposed to do with this time? That feeling, that discomfort, that slight uneasiness, that's part of it. That's not a problem. That's actually a sign that you're not used to this yet. Most people aren't. We get so used to filling every moment that when there's nothing to fill it with, we don't know how to sit still. But give it a little time. Don't rush to fix that feeling. Just notice it. Because during those minutes, you don't need to do anything complicated. You can take a walk. Not a fast one. Not for exercise. Just a slow walk, maybe around your neighborhood, noticing things you usually ignore. The sound of your steps. The way the light hits the sidewalk, a tree you've passed 100 times but never really looked at. Or maybe you sit down somewhere quiet, with a cup of coffee, or tea, something warm in your hands, and you just sit. No phone, no checking messages, no background noise, just sitting there, even if at first it feels a bit empty. You could write something down, not a full page, not something perfect, just a few lines. What you're thinking, what you're feeling, even something as simple as, today felt slow, or, I don't know why I feel like this. It doesn't have to make sense. It just has to be honest. Or maybe you read something, not to finish a book, not to achieve anything, just a few pages that make you pause, even for a second. Some people pray, some people reflect quietly, some people just sit there, doing nothing at all. And that's okay too, because the point isn't the activity. It's not about doing it the right way. It's about giving yourself space. That's really it. Space. Space you probably haven't had in a long time. Space to hear your own thoughts, without interruption. Space to feel what you've been pushing aside. Space to notice what's actually going on inside you, beyond the surface. Because without that space, life becomes loud. Not always in a physical way, but in your mind. Constant movement, constant thinking, constant reacting. And when everything feels like that, it's hard to see clearly. You just move from one thing to the next, without really checking in with yourself. But when you start creating these small, quiet moments, something shifts. Not immediately. Don't expect that. At first, you might just feel restless, or bored, or like nothing is happening. But if you stay with it, day after day, even just a little, you begin to notice things. Small things at first. A thought that keeps coming back. A feeling you didn't realize you were carrying. A memory that surfaces when things get quiet. And slowly, you start understanding yourself in a different way. Not all at once, but piece by piece. You begin to see patterns. How you react to certain situations. What makes you uneasy. What actually brings you a sense of calm. Even if it's very simple. And over time, something changes. You don't wake up one day completely different. That's not how this works. But You start to feel more steady, more grounded, like you're not being pulled in every direction, more present in your own life, more aware of what's happening inside you, not just around you. And that connection, that quiet understanding of yourself, it becomes something you can rely on, especially later, when life slows down, when the noise fades, when there's more space than before. Because instead of feeling lost in that space, you've already been there. You've already spent time with yourself. So it doesn't feel unfamiliar. It feels natural, like returning to a place you know. Now, here's something that happens to a lot of people. They try this once, maybe twice, and then they stop. They say, it didn't work. Or, I didn't feel anything. Or, I don't see the point. And that's understandable, because we're used to quick results. We're used to doing something and seeing something change right away. But this is different. This is slower, much slower. This is not about feeling peaceful after one day, or clear after 1 week. It doesn't work like that. This is about building something over time, something you can't rush. It's like planting something in the ground. You don't plant it and then expect to see a tree the next morning. You water it. You come back to it. You give it time. Days pass. Nothing seems different. Weeks pass. Still nothing obvious. And then, slowly, something begins to grow. Not all at once. Not in a way that draws attention. But steadily, quietly, until one day, you realize it's there. Stronger than you expected. And that's what this habit is like. It doesn't demand much. Just a little time. A little consistency. A willingness to sit with yourself, even when it feels unfamiliar. And over time, it gives you something that becomes more valuable than you first imagined. Something steady. Something real. Something that stays. Let me tell you about someone. Not a story that makes headlines. Not something you'd hear people talk about at a big gathering. Just a quiet life. The kind that blends into everything else. The kind most people would walk past without noticing anything unusual. Her name was Margaret, 72 years old. If you saw her from the outside, just passing by, you'd probably think, well, she's doing all right. Nothing stands out. She has her own small house. Not fancy, but tidy. A little garden out front that she still tries to take care of, even if it's just watering a few plants every now and then. Her health, not perfect, but stable enough. No major issues. Her children, they visit sometimes. Not every week, but they come. They call occasionally. From a distance, everything seems fine. Nothing obviously broken. Nothing that would make you stop and think, something's wrong here. But if you actually spent time with her, not just a quick hello, but really sat down, maybe in her living room around late afternoon, when the light starts to fade a little, you'd feel it. Not something you can point to. More like an atmosphere, a heaviness, the kind that sits quietly in the room, the kind of silence that doesn't feel restful. It feels hollow. Every morning, her day starts the same way, almost exactly the same. She wakes up around the same time. No alarm clock anymore. Her body just does it. Walks slowly into the kitchen, puts the kettle on, waits, listens to the sound of water heating, pours tea into the same cup she's used for years. Then she goes to the window. That chair, it's always been there, right next to it. And she sits, looking out at the same street, same houses, same sidewalk, same quiet. At first, she told herself she liked it. The peace, the calm, no pressure, no rushing. And maybe, at the beginning, that was true. But over time, that quiet started to change. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It became something else, something harder to admit. Loneliness, not loud, not overwhelming, just there. All the time. Her phone didn't ring much. Sometimes days would pass, then a week, and when it did ring, it felt like something rare, something she didn't want to end too quickly. Her days, they felt long, longer than they used to, even though, technically, she had less to do. And that's the strange part. You'd think having more time would feel easier, but for her, it felt heavier. And the confusing thing was, she had lived a full life. She really had. She raised her children. She worked. She took care of things. She did everything she was supposed to do. Everything people tell you to do. And yet, sitting there by that window, she felt like something was missing. Not something she could touch. Not something she could fix. Something deeper. Something that didn't have a clear name. Just a feeling. Like there was a gap somewhere inside her life. One day, something small happened. So small that if you weren't paying attention, you'd miss it. Her neighbor knocked on the door. A woman, maybe in her 50s. Not someone Margaret knew very well. Just someone she'd seen outside a few times. They exchanged a few words here and there. Nothing more. That day, the neighbor asked a simple question. Do you want to go for a walk? Just like that. Nothing planned. Nothing complicated. Just 15 minutes. Margaret almost said no. Actually, she did hesitate. She felt tired. Not physically tired, just not in the mood. She told herself, it doesn't really matter. It's just a walk. It won't change anything. She even thought about making an excuse, but something, small, quiet, made her say yes. And they went. That walk wasn't special. Not in the way people imagine. They didn't have a deep conversation. They didn't share anything profound. Most of the time, they were just walking, side by side, in silence, step by step, slowly. But something about it shifted. Not in a big way, not something she could explain. Just a slight change. The next day, she went again. This time, alone. She didn't tell anyone, didn't make a plan, just put on her shoes and walked. 15 minutes, that's all. Then the next day, maybe a little longer, 20 minutes, then 30. And during those walks, things started to come back. Things she hadn't noticed in years. The way sunlight moves through the trees. Not just bright, but soft, changing as the day goes on. The sound of birds. Not background noise, but actual sound. Different tones, different rhythms. And then, something else. Her body. The feeling of walking. Her breath. The way her steps felt on the ground. Simple things, but they made her feel present. And then, her thoughts. At first, they weren't easy. They were heavy. Memories she hadn't thought about in a long time. Regrets. Questions. Things she avoided thinking about when life was busy. They came up, one by one, and she didn't push them away. Not this time. She just let them be there. And slowly, those thoughts began to change. Not disappear, but soften. Because for the first time in a long time, she was giving herself space. Not to fix anything. Not to solve anything. Just to feel it. Weeks passed. Then months. Nothing dramatic happened. No big turning point. But small things started to shift. She found an old notebook. Started writing a few lines each day. Nothing structured. Nothing perfect. Just whatever came to mind. Some days, only one sentence. Some days, a page. It didn't matter. It felt honest. She also started calling one person each week. Just one. An old friend. At first, it felt strange, a little awkward, like, why am I calling after all this time? But the conversations, they became warmer, easier, familiar. She didn't suddenly change everything. Her life didn't become exciting. She didn't turn into a completely different person, but she adjusted, little by little, small habits, small changes, and over time, something real shifted. That same house, still quiet. That same chair, still by the window. That same street, unchanged. But the feeling, different. The silence, no longer empty. It felt calm. Her days, still simple, still slow, but no longer heavy. They had meaning. Not big meaning. Not something she needed to explain. Just enough. Enough to feel okay. Enough to feel connected. Enough to feel like she was still living, not just passing time. And if you saw her now, sitting in that same place, looking out that same window, you would still see quiet. But it wouldn't feel the same. Not hollow, not distant. There would be something else there. Something softer. Something settled. Peaceful. And the surprising part? That change didn't come from anything big. Not a major decision. Not a dramatic event. Just something small. Something almost easy to overlook. But she didn't overlook it anymore. So, if we stop there, with just one habit, it's helpful. Yes, but it's not enough. Life isn't built on one thing. And honestly, neither is peace. You can spend time with yourself every day and still feel something missing. Because there are other pieces, quieter ones, easy to ignore. But they matter just as much, maybe more than we think. So let's go a little deeper. Not all at once, just step by step. The next thing is connection. Real connection. And I know, when people hear that, they usually think, yeah, of course, that's obvious. We all know we need people, but knowing it, and actually maintaining it, are two very different things. Because what really happens in life is not dramatic. It's not like one day you decide, I don't need anyone anymore. It doesn't work like that. It happens slowly, quietly, almost without noticing. You call less. At first, it's just because you're busy. Then it becomes, I'll call them later. Then later turns into, it's been too long now. Maybe it's awkward. You assume other people are busy. You don't want to bother them. You wait for them to reach out first. And they might be thinking the same thing. So both sides wait. And time passes. And nothing happens. And before you realize it, there's distance. Not the kind you measure in miles. Something else. Something harder to see, but easier to feel. Emotional distance. You still know each other. You still care. But the connection isn't as alive as it used to be. And here's the part that catches people off guard. You don't have to be physically alone to feel lonely. You can sit in a room with family, hear voices around you, even be part of conversations, and still feel separate somehow. Like you're there, but not fully there. Because real connection isn't just about being near people. It's not just about showing up. It's about presence. It's about feeling like someone really sees you. Like they hear you, not just your words, but what's behind them. Like you matter. Even in small moments. Like someone remembers you, thinks of you, reaches out without a reason. That's connection. And without it, something inside us slowly fades. So the habit sounds simple. Almost too simple again. Reach out. That's it. Even when it feels unnecessary. Even when your first thought is, they're probably busy. Even when it feels a little awkward, like you don't know what to say. Call someone. You don't need a reason. Visit someone, even for a short time. Send a message. Not something formal. Just, I was thinking about you. That's enough. Because connection works like a muscle. If you use it, it stays alive. If you don't, it weakens. Not all at once, but little by little. And rebuilding it later is always harder than maintaining it now. Now, there's another piece to this. Something that becomes more important the quieter life gets. Taking care of your inner world. And I don't mean that in a complicated way. I mean, your thoughts, your emotions, your spirit. Because when life is busy, you don't notice what's going on inside you as much. There's always something to distract you, something to focus on. But when things slow down, your inner world gets louder. If your mind is restless, you hear it more clearly. If you've been carrying things, old pain, unresolved feelings, things you never really dealt with, they don't disappear. They show up, sometimes stronger than before. So things like reflection or prayer or just sitting quietly and thinking, they stop being optional. They become necessary, not as a task, but as a way to stay balanced, to not feel overwhelmed by your own thoughts. Because if you don't take care of that part of your life, it starts taking over. And then there's one more habit. And this one, people often underestimate. Keep learning. Not in a big way. Not like going back to school or anything like that. Just don't stop being curious. Because something interesting happens when people stop learning. They don't just stop gaining new knowledge. They start shrinking. Not in a physical sense, but in how they see the world. Things become repetitive, predictable, less interesting. Days feel the same. And over time, that affects how you feel about life itself. But curiosity, even small curiosity, changes that. It keeps your mind moving. It gives you something to look forward to, something to explore. It can be simple, learning how to cook something new, reading about something you've never paid attention to before, trying to understand a topic you used to ignore, even asking questions you didn't think to ask before. It doesn't have to be impressive. It just has to be alive. Because learning reminds you you're still growing. And that feeling matters more than people think, especially as you get older. Because it tells you life isn't finished yet. There's still something ahead, still something to discover. And when you bring all of this together, staying connected, taking care of your inner world, keeping your mind curious, something shifts. Not in a loud way, not in a way people immediately notice, but inside. It changes things. You don't just go through your days. You don't just wait for time to pass. You stay involved, even in small ways, even in quiet moments. You feel like you're still part of life, not watching from the outside, but actually living it. And that makes all the difference. And then there's something deeper than all of this, deeper than habits, deeper than routines, even deeper than the things we do every day. It's not something you can check off a list, not something you can measure easily. It's quieter than that. But it sits underneath everything. It shapes how all the other pieces feel. It's your spiritual understanding. Now, that might sound like a big word, or something distant, but it's actually very close. Very personal. Because when people reach a certain point in life, especially when things slow down, when there's more quiet than noise, the questions change. They're not just about what to do next, or how to stay busy. They become more honest, sometimes uncomfortable. Questions like, was my life actually meaningful? Not just busy, not just productive, but meaningful. Did I live the right way? Did I choose well? Or did I just follow what I thought I was supposed to do? Did I love enough? Not in a general way, but really, did I show it? Did I say it? Did I let people feel it? Did I forgive when I should have? Or did I hold on longer than I needed to? Are there things, small things, that I'm still carrying, even now? And those questions, they don't go away easily. They sit there. They come back at quiet times. Maybe when you're lying in bed at night. Maybe when you're sitting alone, not doing anything. They don't demand answers right away, but they ask you to look honestly. And the truth is, these are not small questions. There's no simple answer you can give and move on. They take time. They take reflection. And people have been facing these kinds of questions for generations. Across different places, different cultures, different beliefs. And even though the words might change, the core ideas, they're often very similar. Ideas about being content, about letting go, about trusting something bigger than just yourself. And one of the simplest but hardest ideas is this: Learning to be content. Not because everything turned out perfectly, because it didn't. No one's life is perfect. There are always things that didn't go the way you hoped, things you wish you could change, moments you would redo if you could. But contentment doesn't come from fixing all of that. It comes from something else, from accepting what is, not in a passive way, not in a way that says, nothing matters, but in a way that says, this is where I am, and I can still find peace here. It's letting go of that constant feeling that things should have been different, because that feeling, if you hold on to it, it doesn't give you energy, it takes it away. And then there's forgiveness. This one, people carry quietly, for years, sometimes decades. Things that were said, things that were never said, situations that ended badly, misunderstandings that were never cleared up, small wounds that never healed properly. And over time, those things don't just disappear, they sit somewhere inside. You might not think about them every day, but they're there. And as time goes on, they can feel heavier. Not because they changed, but because you're carrying them longer. And forgiveness is often misunderstood. People think it's about saying, it was okay, or pretending nothing happened. But it's not that. It's more personal than that. It's about releasing yourself from the weight. It's about deciding, I don't want to carry this anymore. Not for them, for you. Because holding on to it doesn't protect you. It keeps you tied to something that already passed. And letting go doesn't erase the past, but it changes how it lives inside you. And then there's trust. And this one is difficult in its own way, because we're used to trying to control things. We plan, we prepare, we try to make sure things go the way we expect. And for a long time, that works. Or at least, it feels like it does. But life eventually shows us. Not everything can be controlled. Things happen. Changes come. Situations unfold in ways we didn't plan for. And at some point, you're faced with a choice. Keep resisting everything that doesn't go your way. Or start accepting that some things are simply not in your hands. And that acceptance, it doesn't mean giving up. It doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop fighting every moment that doesn't match your expectations, because that constant resistance, it wears you down. And when you ease that grip, even a little, something shifts. There's more space, more calm, not because everything is perfect, but because you're no longer pushing against everything. These ideas, they're not new. Most people have heard them before, in different ways, at different times in their life. But here's the thing, they're easy to forget, especially when life is busy, when there's always something to do, somewhere to go, something to fix. But as life slows down, these ideas come back, not as theories, but as something you actually need, because they help you make sense of things. They help you find balance when everything else is changing. And in the end, when you really look at it, peace doesn't come from what you have, not really. It doesn't come from how much you achieved, or how everything turned out. It comes from something quieter, from how you relate to what you have, how you see it, how you accept it, how you carry it. That's where the difference is, and that's what makes all the rest feel either heavy or light. So, let's come back to that question from the beginning. Not quickly, just sit with it again for a moment. Why is it that some people grow older and seem settled, calm, almost at ease with everything, while others, even when life looks stable, still feel something unsettled inside? At first, it feels like it must be something big, something obvious, some turning point, some major difference in life. But now, after going through all of this, you can probably feel it. It's not like that. It's not one thing. Not one moment where everything changed. Not one decision that determined everything. It's smaller than that. much smaller, and also more powerful than we usually think. It's a collection of small habits, things you repeat without even noticing sometimes, day after day, in quiet ways, in ordinary moments, not dramatic, not visible from the outside, but consistent. That's the key. Consistent. Spending a little time with yourself, not to achieve anything, just to be there, to listen, to understand what's going on inside you, staying connected with people, not waiting for the perfect moment, not waiting for a reason, just reaching out, even in small ways, taking care of what's happening inside you, your thoughts, your emotions, the things you carry that no one else sees, continuing to learn, not because you have to, but because it keeps something alive in you, curiosity, interest, a sense that life is still moving, still offering something new. And then, those deeper things, acceptance, forgiveness, trust, not easy things, not things you figure out once and then you're done. They take time. They come and go. Some days you feel it. Some days you don't. But they matter. More than most people realize. And here's the thing. None of this is complicated. When you hear it, it all sounds simple. Almost too simple. But simple doesn't mean automatic. That's where people get stuck. Because knowing something and actually living it are not the same. These habits don't build themselves. They don't just appear later in life because you need them. They require intention. Small decisions. Repeated. Even when you don't feel like it. Even when it doesn't seem important. And maybe the most important part of all this, you don't have to wait. You don't need to reach a certain age. You don't need something to go wrong first. You don't need to feel lost before you start paying attention. You can begin right now, exactly where you are, even if your life is busy, even if your days are full, even if you think, I'll deal with this later. Later comes faster than we expect. So start small. Not everything at once. Not 5 things at the same time. Just one. Maybe it's a few minutes of quiet before the day gets loud. Maybe it's calling someone you haven't spoken to in a while. Not because you have something important to say, just because. Maybe it's sitting for a moment and asking yourself, how am I actually feeling right now? And not rushing past the answer. Just one small habit. That's enough. Because that's how it begins. And if this made you pause, even for a second, if something here felt familiar, or hit a little closer than you expected, then take that seriously. Don't brush it off. Don't tell yourself, I'll think about it later. Just take a moment. Right after this, think about what you can start with. Not what sounds impressive, not what sounds perfect, just something real, something you'll actually do. And if there's someone in your life, maybe your parents, maybe an older friend, maybe someone who doesn't say much, but you can sense something is off, share this with them. Not in a heavy way, just gently, because sometimes people don't need a big solution. They just need a small reminder at the right time. And that can be enough to shift something, more than you think. And before we end, just hold on to this one thought. Getting older is not the end of anything. It doesn't have to be a decline. It can be something else entirely. It can be the most peaceful part of life, the most meaningful part, the part where things finally make sense, where you feel settled in yourself. But that doesn't just happen. It grows from how you live now, from the small things you choose today, even the ones that don't seem important. They are more than you realize.